The other thing that I find interesting for high-performing teams is the ability to label your emotions and talk about it. Clearly, he's one of the most successful investors.
They were doing a lot of social experiments, observing the results, being in situations which were fear-inducing and what that adrenaline has and the impact it has on your emotions.
He was in tune with the emotion of the market, which meant that he was always going to win. The reason why, though, I think we're probably about to debate.
G'day everyone, welcome to Psy-Find, where we find out some interesting things about interesting people about psychology. Tom, g'day.
Hey, look.
Good to see you.
How you both doing?
Yeah, good. I was just telling you both that I've been ordering pizzas and seeing which pizza shop has been able to diversify into hot chits effectively. Apparently that means I'm struggling to head towards obesity, which I think we'll probably talk about today.
What is your current sample size?
I've done 12 pizza shops.
I didn't even know 12 pizza shops are diversified in chips.
Tom. Yeah.
Got to look in the extra section on Uber Eats.
Someone's got to go to dumplings or something.
When you're diamond status on Uber Eats, which I am.
What does that even mean?
What do you mean? What does it mean?
Does the guy turn up in a little tux?
Well, because I travelled so much last year in Ubers, because I don't have a car, and I only live 3 kilometers as the crow flies away. I got you get points and it racks up and gives you free stuff. So
free chips.
Do you have a good Uber rating?
Oh, my Uber rating's gone back up.
I
was stuck on 4.74 for a year and a half. It's now at 4.9, and I'm not hot.
Nah, but I've been enough Ubers with you to know that you have weird Uber encounters. You always get
the guy that
you want to hire, or
I had the guy that was missing his hand that time.
He was a cool guy.
He was a cool guy.
He was a stockbroker who lost his hand and also played the NBA.
That's what I mean.
But anyway, because I get such
Before
a discount.
the hand.
Anyway.
I get like a 30% discount on some Uber meals.
It's pretty good.
So I've been testing out my pizza. You'd be quite surprised who's got the good chips.
So today, who are we talking about?
I thought we were talking about Uber.
Yeah. So we're going a bit different. The last few weeks have been talking about individuals who have more so contributed to the psychology around the workplace. Today is more around the social sciences and an individual called Stanley Schachter. I googled that one as well.
Is it Schachter?
Schachter.
Schachter.
Yes. Schachter. Tom, you want to tell us a little bit about Stanley?
So this is interesting. I hadn't come across his work at all. Not that I've read anywhere near everything about psychology, but I read, I did my homework, Luke, and I read through the things. It's quite interesting what he's done. Most of his focus was around emotion was the primary one. So 2-factor emotion, which we'll talk about in a sec. A little bit around obesity, which was kind of tied to the emotion piece. And then a tiny little bit around, what was nicotine and addiction. But not really addiction at large. It was more to do with smoking, again, tied to the original emotion thing. So he talked about this thing called 2-factor emotion, which is it's this weird, congruence of your brain reacts to the external stimuli that you're feeling, which labels the emotion that you should feel, and then you have the emotion. There's 2 ways that I would describe this. One is, he talks about it in one of his books. You're walking in a dark alley towards your car, a man's coming towards you, you see that person, you then think that you should be scared, then you feel fear. So external stimuli causing you to feel an emotion. The other way that I thought about it is kids. You know how we always look at kids when you see a young kid fall over and they look to their parents and then cry? That's another version of where you've learned emotion. So people say, they're doing it for attention, but it's actually probably more the fact that the kid's trying to show you that they know what to do. They know the correct thing to do. When you fall over, you cry. So they're actually showing you that they know the right thing to do, which comes back to the point that they fell over and they want to show you that they know the emotion. So they label the emotion internally and then have the emotion. Where I find it hard to understand his science is we do the same thing in dreams. So you can have no external stimuli, have a dream and wake up with the same level of emotion like fear. So I haven't quite figured out, and I didn't read enough to see where that came out, but I found that interesting as well. So I think there's some interesting stuff in here that will come out as we talk about it, but the 2-factor emotion thing is quite intriguing.
Yeah, like some of that's interesting. Some of it's pretty boring though.
That or what I said.
What you just said. I find that the thing that you missed is that Stanley has the same glasses as Luke Rix. Did you see that picture? It looks exactly like
I
him.
don't think I picked
The
that
other
one.
thing that here's another fun fact about Stanley. He joined the army. Shock.
They
I
always
did see
do
that.
way.
Yeah, they're
Another-
always-
Although I
But
feel
you
like
know
you
what
gave us the list of people, so maybe you did this on purpose.
I didn't. No, I didn't. I think I asked you for the list.
I don't know.
Did you set the list?
This is one that you picked up.
Right.
Mm.
It was some psychologist, like read all these psychologists to understand. Anyway, master of psychology, then joins the army as a sergeant, which is pretty interesting, including working in the biophysics division to study visual problems experienced by pilots in flight. So obviously it was 1944, it was the war, but not many people do a master's in psychology at Yale and then go join the army as a sergeant. Which means he wanted to get into the thick of it. He also would have went through recruit school, which I think boot camp in World War II at that time of the war would have been pretty interesting. I don't think they would have been fucking around.
I agree.
There would be some very strict NCOs that would have been there, that would have come off tour, and I reckon it would have been a pretty hard place. Almost, I think it reflects in some of the things that he studied. Yeah, look at him. See?
I saw the picture.
They're cool glasses.
How do I share my
They all
screen?
they all come back around.
Can I share my screen on this podcast?
I don't know. We're not that good yet. So what I think is pretty interesting, there's two things that. The first thing that I find interesting is that the type of guy he was with a master's of psychology from Yale, and then goes to recruit school as a sergeant, or as a recruiter becoming a sergeant. His first thing is deviation, rejection, and communication. Social pressures to conform to fit cohesiveness and match opinions of the group and significant other group members. Something that happens significantly throughout the course of boot camp. So that's pretty interesting. So obviously that had some sort of effect on his life, which I think probably led to his later theories. The other thing that I found pretty interesting is, if you remember our mate fucking Galton.
Yep.
Yeah, he's back in there.
Back again.
Yeah.
What I and he goes, well, he was interested in resolving the idea of birth order and eminence, right? Which is the same thing that the guy.
Galton was doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, but so this guy did it too, but this guy worked out really simply that most of Sir Francis Galton people has had a college degree. So the sample is irrelevant when it comes to humanity.
That's right. He said we got to stop doing sample sizes on university
But
campuses.
you know what? He goes, either the firstborn or the only child in the family are highly likely to be a genius, right? He only had one kid. The dude tried to prove it, sicko. Like he had one child to probably try to prove this theory that one child could be a genius. I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, he had one kid post that discovery to
No,
test
he only had
it.
one kid.
Well, no, that conversation with
So
his
maybe
wife
he
went-
actually ran the experiment. It's pretty interesting.
He did a fair bit of studies into firstborn children, though, and looked at the fact that firstborn children are more achievement striving, and it makes them far more, I think he said, anxious was the
Was Warren
terminology.
Buffett firstborn?
I don't know. I'll look into that when we
I'll
talk.
have to pull that up.
Yeah.
Get that wiki up.
We'll chat about Warren Buffett in a second.
The connection to boot camp's interesting. When you were talking
It's
about
right. So what I think there is this understanding of people that have seen the military operate within academia and psychology, and then try to make sense of it.
Oh,
Like throughout the rest of their life, though.
absolutely. Yeah.
They're trying to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other guy that tried to make sense of it was Sebastian Younger.
Yeah, because it works.
And then, Elliot last week was trying to make sense of it, and then try to put it over society. And the other guy that tries to make sense of it is Simon Sinek. The self-help dude's even trying to make sense of it.
And people always put it down to training, but it's so much more than training. Like it's the whole rejection, deviation, communication, ego, culture, structure. The whole works comes into how the military functions like that.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. Like I would describe it as like everybody needs to have a worry. Like you've always got to have a worry to fit in. So whenever you get the slightest chance of having a worry, it becomes the coolest thing ever, so that you have your version of the story, and then everyone just kind of keeps having that thing. But if you never got one, you never feel like you fit in.
Yeah.
And we saw that when we went back to war in the early days.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that he went from trying to understand group dynamics and social pressures to then trying to understand addiction. which is pretty much what he tried to do, like the obesity and eating, and then nicotine regulation and smoking. What I find is interesting about his career, though, is the dude was traveling everywhere, and then all of a sudden, once he found the thread to pull on, which seems to be this two-factor emotion, he didn't leave that university. He didn't leave Columbia. He stayed there for the rest of his life. He's like, I think there's something interesting about how professors obsess over things. Like, I can't move until I get to the bottom of this cave. I'm not sure he got to the bottom of it, though, but he did provide some interesting insights.
I like that his research sort of somewhat follows the male stages of growth, like trying to fit in, family, overweight, stressed eating, and then like nicotine.
Smoking, yeah.
Well, it's to try to fit in, fuck fitting in. I'm just gonna get addicted to stuff to see what happens, and then growing up.
More than anything, though, he does experiments with individuals.
Yeah.
And almost everything that he does comes back down to some sort of experiment. What do you think he's trying to find out, discover? Why is he looking so deeply into that?
I think it's just...
Well, I think it's the only lab tool they have. Because it was the 60s. Like, they can't access anything else that shows them anything than observing somebody in weird scenarios that they have to craft because they can't, they can't use data, they can't model, they can't use other technology.
It was just the cognitive. I think after World War II was it described as the cognitive period of psychology, where they had like a cognitive revolution of like, well, we don't want to kill everyone again, so we better figure out how everyone works. And if you think about, we haven't analysed old Hitler yet, which I don't think we're ready to, but
we might be.
There's a lot of things that were, his temperament wasn't really bad, so he was quite regulated. He was quite, there's a whole bunch of stuff behind it, but
yeah, he's not a psychopath.
He's correct.
That's what we're talking about the other day.
And a lot of guys have tried to make the argument that he was quite rational within his contextual circumstances, but the rationality led to terrible things. So I think that sort of thing terrified people, because remember, the decade before, everyone in the world loved him. He's the dude that turned a European country around, held the Olympics, made people excited about the Olympics again, which is still going probably up until, I'd say, 10 years ago. People aren't excited about that now. I think Athens ruined it.
Anyway, yeah.
Drugs.
No, Athens ruined it. And everyone working out that... I'm not going to get into it. I'm not...
Talk about the Olympics.
We'll add that to the next podcast.
To the next one. Well, my point, though, is that was the 60s. They were doing a lot of social experiments, observing the results. Like, one of the ones that were in here was around external, being in situations which were fear-inducing, and what that adrenaline has and the impact it has on your emotions. And the experiment that he did was they put people in scenarios whereby they were at heights or other fear-inducing scenarios, and they found out that those people were more likely to try to hit on the subject, on the researchers, than the others, because they've got the fear-inducing adrenaline to their body. So those types of experiments, though, obviously they're not highly scientific. How much do you think of what he did is still relevant today, and how much has been disproved and different now?
Well, I don't know if has it been disproved?
I think some of it's been disproved. I don't know formally if it's been, like, I know of other research, we were talking about it before we started the podcast, where he's sort of saying your emotions are regulated by your external stimuli, but there's other research in neuroscience saying no, there's a biological level to your emotional reactions. For example, he talks about smoking and addiction. You have mitochondria in your body. Mitochondria exist to do one thing: eat, so keep you alive; reproduce, to keep your species alive; and fear, to keep you alive. And one of the things that keeps you alive is addiction. So addiction to carbohydrates, for example, because it's sugars, is critical to mitochondria's survival. So at the grassroots of a human processing unit, you have billions of mitochondria, and their sole purpose of being alive is to stay alive. And therefore that charges a lot of the emotions you have, i.e. running away from things that are scary that would kill you. And it comes from a very, very biological level. I don't know whether it disproves it, or it's just like that's where it comes from, which actually enables what he's talking about, to realize that that's scary and therefore have the emotion.
Yeah, but I think you can put you could put cognitive labels on things in times of sociological arousal. So when you're aroused, to change someone's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find really interesting is how, and I'll bring it back to the army because I don't know much about much, where people freak out in adventure training in the high wire course, but then we sit the same people when we've got a mission and a task and the equipment on and are sitting on the side of a Black Hawk helicopter with just a belt that's holding you in as it's going 580 miles an hour, aren't freaked out. And they've got less safety equipment on. It's the same person. So one of the things I find really interesting is that when it comes down to overcoming fear is using, they like improved they put cognitive labels on things. Like the high wire course is scary, but jumping out of a Black Hawk is cool. And if it's cool, it's a different arousal. And I don't know, I couldn't explain it, but if the adrenaline's pumping and it's cool, then don't be scared about it. But then the high wires course is a big thing. You better get through it. Don't you be scared. And then everyone's scared. So I found the use of cognitive labels matched to whatever they've themed can create a temperamental response change at the time. So the high wires course being labeled as scary, and then the physical arousal of it actually being scary because you see more people getting scared. When you finish it, you feel a higher level of achievement, which actually leads to more openness. So when then you get in the Black Hawk, and they make you sit on your knee, and you fucking got your little cam creams on, and the way the thing lands, like the Black Hawk's, it's a cool helicopter. Like it looks like this wasp that flies at you like this it flies at you with its blades forward. Like it means it's like, I'm gonna fly at you like the Fruit Ninja, and I'm gonna cut you down whilst I come in. Like it's pretty hard to cut down like that in the air. And everyone's like, oh, that's cool. And then when the same risk or even more risk, and it's the same type of risk that's on the high wires course happens, due to the achievement of the high wires course, which has improved your openness, you want to be the person that jumps off the Black Hawk first. And then it's not scary until you see it systematically fail. So you see the Black Hawk crash, for example. Whereas like that thing's indestructible. But that's what I like. So you don't value like the workspace you're not scared of. You just get scared of that the indestructible thing got destroyed. And the scary thing got destroyed. So I think there's significant value, and I think in some cases the military has proven it, in putting cognitive labels and arousals to adjust people's temperament. 100%. So when something is more scared, people don't run away. So I think if it comes back to sort of fight or flight, it is definitely used quite well.
Are there people in the military who read this sort of stuff to then come up with those sorts of...
Yeah. So cognitive labeling is 100% correct. Adventure training is a good example. And the way they label it is post the activity. So the power in adventure training is in the debrief afterwards. And you actually, if you run it properly, are supposed to talk about the emotion. What emotion did you feel? What was going on in your body? Oh, actually, 6 of those things you just described are controllable by you through breathing, through visualization, through mental preparedness. And that's how they get people ready for combat.
That's really specialized though. So those guys know.
They know what to do.
People that design the courses know, but people that are operating the functions don't.
Yeah, that's right. They're just
but
going through
that makes it more real. It's like a ride at a thing. You don't know how it works. You don't want the guy that's pulling the lever to know how it all works either, because then he's going to tell you, you'll be fine, you'll be safe because of this, this, and this. You don't want to know that.
It's like when we went from blank fire training to force-on-force airsoft or paintball, if you don't know what airsoft is.
Yeah.
Completely changed the whole psychology of it, but the training was pretty much the same.
Ooh, yep.
So the other side of it I find interesting is the way the brain hardwires things. There's some interesting case studies in injury for elite athletes where they injured themselves, whether they're a runner or on the bike, and they might have hurt their knee or their ankle. And then even though they're fully rehabilitated, as soon as they get back on the bike, they get pain. The brain associates the fact that bike caused me that significant trouble in my life. Now I'm back on the bike and you've got pain again, even though there's actually nothing wrong with them. So depending on their experiences in life or how the brain has hardwired things, and that happens in really weird ways. Like high ropes, that could have been hardwired from a kid watching a video where someone fell off something.
Oh, I hate heights.
Like the way that it can be hardwired is just unbelievable.
I don't know why I hate heights, but I don't hate them when I'm sitting in a Black Hawk. That's the weird thing.
Or on a plane flying to Canberra.
Yeah, I don't hate them there either.
Yeah.
It's so to answer the question on two-factor emotion, I think he was onto something. I think it's valuable, and it's back to that conversation we were having the other day about don't be a dog wagged by its tail. One
classic military saying too, by the way.
Well, yeah. One saying is don't be driven by your past because the tail's behind you. The other sort of version of it is don't get excited and just run straight into the breach. Like you're not indestructible. Like don't let that tail wag excitement not make a clear decision. So if you're the one that's in the seat making decisions, you've got to really lower your, I don't know, the adrenaline to a point where you actually can see the risk can make the decision. So I do think that emotion has a huge effect on temperament. I don't understand how you would conduct it and label it at scale to create responses that you would want. I think they're done over time, long periods of time, and they form part of our almost sociology and rules rather more than anything else.
And there is significant studies in emotional development over time. Most of the studies have been done on children because they want to see how fast they, and often children cognitively develop in different rates to they emotionally develop. I know something's wrong and I shouldn't be upset, but I'm really, really upset because they haven't figured out how to process it yet.
Yeah, maybe it's like that thing. You know, we're trying to work out, so I don't have any response to people thanking me. I have no label on it. There's no emotive label on it.
Could be something to do with your upbringing.
Maybe, most definitely. But it doesn't, it's to the point where you don't even recognize it. Whereas if Ben was saying, if I say to Ben, he's like, whoa, like it has a physical effect. So whatever I tell Ben after I say, thank you, Ben, I reckon I have, his agreeableness and openness changes. So he'll then do, the chances of him doing what I ask him to do after that point it'll probably be increased.
On Schachter's work, how much of it do you think and what parts of it could be relevant to people trying to build high-performing teams in the workplace?
I think two things that we've spoken about. One, Tom's point about the way you can deliver environmental-based training to prepare people for things, even like interview preparation. Or, I guess...
we've laid that. One thing
depends what the team's going to do, right?
Like, just give them a project to do rather than the interview process.
Making someone associate stressful things with controllable activities or emotions, or like that it's not that stressful. By removing the fear, I guess, is probably the common phrase. The other thing that I find interesting for high-performing teams is the ability to label your emotions and talk about it. We talk about it here like transparency is one of our values. But really, there's something in our transparency value that is, hey, we just need to talk about all the things that you're feeling because you're reacting based off that internally. But if we don't know what it is, we don't know how to help, or we don't know how to change the environment or whatever it might be.
Well, is this similar to how many times, Tom, has someone complained in a customer service setting and you've just said to them, are you okay? Because often they're not.
Yeah, I think there's that level. But if you break down what your question asks, and you know this quite well, what's a high-performing team? The definition of a high-performing team is that they can achieve their objective in the most effective and efficient way possible, and it's done through something we call shared consciousness. So I know when someone over there is going to do something before they're going to do it because I know them. Shared consciousness is created by, I know the tasks of each stage of the production line and where I sit on it, as well as everyone else, or my oppo. And two, I understand how their individual temperament contributes to the group temperament, which is a very, very big different thing. So what I think you could use is this theory on emotion, and you have to be, and this is the coach's job, whoever the coach is. It might not even be the manager. It could be the captain. It could be anyone that's more attuned, or it could be a separate entity. You can use this theory of emotion to probably do two things. And you should probably only do one of them. You should probably not do the second one. The first one is improve just-in-time temperament.
Mm-hmm.
So right at the point of conflict, which like is the solution that you just discussed, which is, hey, is everything just all right? That's trying to improve just-in-time temperament because there's a communication barrier or a high level of anxiety. How do you improve just-in-time temperament? Using the theory of emotion. Well, there's two things that make people's temperament shit. Did you eat today and did you sleep today? The second bit is understanding that their temperamental differences are actually their advantages. So when someone's frustrated, understanding that they have low openness, sometimes giving them tasks that are a little bit more difficult, that are a little bit more complex, and giving the team a set of rules or values like disagree and commit will allow them to go from having an individual temperament to matching what the team's temperament required. And that's the only one you should do. The long-term one, you don't want to do it. You're not a psychiatrist. You're not a clinical psychologist, which is like you have long-term things that you need to address that have occurred to you that have possibly been caused by experiences and trauma that you need to work through as an individual as a part of your mental health. Some people's temperament is way off, generally due to how they were brought up, generally due to the lack of paternal relationships.
Yeah, lack or too much. Yeah.
That's generally what it is. So, and remember, I keep saying generally for a reason because I'm not an expert in any of these things. But what you can do as a coach is go, well, what is a high-performing team? A high-performing team is this. A high-performing team has an understanding of its task, but it has an understanding of its temperament. We need to be more open-minded as a team. We need to be more conscientious as a team. We need to be more agreeable. Doesn't matter. A good coach or a good manager will identify what we need to be as a team in order to win. If you're the underdog, guess what? You're going to have to be more open-minded and less agreeable. You can't keep playing the game the same way as everyone else. And the only way you're going to get people to that team temperament is a good team mission, as well as an understanding of each individual's temperament. And the way you can improve people's temperament is at the point that it creates frustration in your production line. You could probably try to apply this theory of emotion, which is if disagree and commit becomes a rule of the team and you guys all get stuck, look, what does everyone think? Well, 60% think this and 40% think this. And we're really angry about this because we're actually different to you. So I'm more conservative than you, and there's 4 of you, and that's not the case with everyone that's sitting across from me. But the conservative people don't want to do this. And the open-minded people want to do it. And there's only 4 of them, and there's 6% of us. Well, the boss is going to have to go, well, I need to make a decision. That's why someone's in charge, and they're going to go, well, we're going to go with the new decision. So you're going to respond emotionally because you don't agree with it. How I remove your emotional response is go, remember, disagree and commit. And then through good management practices like, let's review the feedback. The feedback loop is an agile loop. And then every day, it's improving.
Which is changing the external stimuli, which is kind of what which Stratch is talking about.
Correct. So I think
where I've seen you do this,
and that is interesting as well because it is the whole idea of disagree and commit is completely different to Schachter's other work around groupthink and the negative reactions that occurs because that people are raising their concerns, but then they're agreeing to move on for the betterment of the team.
Yeah, but see, I think groupthink's just a bunch of dumb people and no leadership.
I think it's a bunch of people.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'd probably determine dumb. If you're in a room of people that are all like you, then what are you going to learn?
Yeah. And
then 2, at some point, someone's going to be accountable and be the leader.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the person that's in charge all the time as well. So, a good way of putting it is like-minded, quiet people. But sometimes some of the loudest people are quiet. It's quiet's not just not talking; it's not
What,
acting.
what I find interesting is that we always use extremes to talk about the findings. And here's a good example, like fear, that you're going to get attacked. But actually, external stimuli comes in communication in a meeting. So starting the meeting with, you know, nobody needs to be stressed. We're going to do a bit of change today, but we thought about it. Or you all might get a little bit emotionally upset. I'm going to say something that's a bit confronting that you haven't heard before.
Yeah.
Like you can actually remove the external stimuli, which is what he's talking about.
People are more conscientious or less open-minded. Even the simple idea of providing them information that's around the issue prior to the meeting will resolve their emotional response on arrival. Like, you can provide it to me too, but I'm probably not going to do it. But I know that you're never going to get me able to do it. So there's no loss in providing the highly conscientious conservative person the notes other than your time. And, well, why is it, you know, should you waste time? No, you shouldn't waste time. And meetings should be very efficient and they should have an output. So the answer is, can this theory of emotion be used to create high-performing teams?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. At the right point of time. But you're not a clinical psychiatrist, so probably don't use it to fix people.
Be careful.
Just use it to improve the performance of the team and get it around friction points. They're two different things.
All right, let's talk about our person for this week, our famous, successful individual.
And there is a connection between the two, which I've found.
So, chat about Warren Buffett. What's the connection you found between the two?
Well, as part of a little bit of, what's his name? Schacher's research was around the psychology of the market.
It was?
Yeah. So talking about how the emotional component of the market is actually more relevant than any economical statistical review. I think there was a weird thing in one of the writings about, what did he say? You should look at fear and greed to make your trend decisions on what you're buying because it's more likely to affect the market than business.
Yeah, and I think that was the example of if there's a plane crash, the market always goes down. And he did a few other studies that were very similar around department store sales go down after the murder in a neighborhood because people are less inclined to leave the market. But what are your thoughts on Warren Buffett?
That is an extremely open.
It is
question.
very open.
I don't know. I mean, you guys know more about him than I do. I'd say clearly he's one of the most successful investors. The reason why, though, I think we're probably about to debate. I don't know whether it's because he was in tune with the emotion of the market or whether he just played things safe and a really long game, which meant that he was always going to win.
What do you think, Tom?
I just think it's boring. I used to, when I've been interested in stocks since I was a kid. I never knew why. I think one of the main, when I was a kid, I mean like probably 12. So maybe becoming a young adult because you start really becoming a kid at about 14. My father and my uncle were very, 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 very successful at playing the stock market in the 90s. Very successful at it. To the point where it probably created them a jump in wealth that would be accustomed to jumping 2 or 3 classes, which is pretty substantial. Like you're going from low class to highest middle class is probably the best way of describing that jump. The other thing is at the time, which is the US model of creating wealth, it's not anymore, and it's a shame, and it stopped with different types of shares, right? Not all ordinary shares. Was that it was a big deal when my dad was working at Lend-Lease on how much stock he was given in Lend-Lease. And he was really given the stock, right? And the shares were super valuable. They still are. Like he still got them. He doesn't work there anymore. But
my auntie worked in a call center at Telstra for 35 years and then got Telstra shares that she bought a house with.
Correct. And you could borrow against them, right? You could. So I think the stock market, and this is why I think it's boring, I think the stock market used to be actually a stock market.
Mm.
I don't necessarily think it is anymore. I don't know enough, and it's a broad statement, and people can fucking whinge. I don't care. The thing though was in the 90s, I saw my uncle and my dad start, build a base of wealth off working at the company my dad was working at, and then that built an interest for him in stocks, like real stocks, and then they started doing stuff. And in I would say 1 out of 18 ventures, they were highly successful. Like, I'm talking the buying it at 1 cent, selling for $42, right? So, at one point, I think they made $25 million a quarter in one of the share prices. It was my uncle.
Which is the equivalent of angel investing these days.
Yes,
but
so,
using the market to do so.
I guess
public markets.
You had low-class families participating in wealth creation through shares, right? So when I was growing up, I'm like, oh, that's an easy way to be wealthy because people seem to be wealthy around me. And I remember the first $5,000 I'd earned working at
Sandy Bay.
Yeah. Shady Find.
It's a surf shop. It's a surf shop.
Surf shop.
Billabong board shorts.
Where you used to get commission for selling stuff.
Yeah.
That's something we need to do a podcast about that. Retail stores, casual employee, you used to get commission for selling stuff. They don't give that out anymore.
Yeah.
There's like some ridiculous bonus target you can't hit, not per item. Like you used to pump sales. And I think it's one of the reasons why the retail sector sort of died, which is they stopped paying people to do it. We used to make killing selling
those globe shoes
and selling
shell necklaces,
4/4, fucking 3/4 board shorts, which gave everyone shape. Sorry, I also bought them, and I put them into shares. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, I had a Comsec account. I think it was a Comsec.
Yeah,
I was playing the stock market, and I lost everything. Because I was trying to play options as a fucking... not understanding what options are, but hearing from a conversation with Linda,
that it's good.
I made 10 grand on the weekend playing options, which is really just gambling against, shorting risk. But one thing I found really interesting was that Warren Buffett is a traditionalist long shareholder that plays the stock market, as is Bill Graham, I think the bookie says it should be played. And I don't think it's being played anymore. You've got the Fed shoring up the US stock market at the moment so they can't get hit by the Chinese. Like there's a few reasons, but they're shoring up the prices. So if you go into a recession and the government's shoring up the prices, then it's not necessarily a free market economy. And this is what they were talking about the other week with zombie companies that are held up by the JobKeeper payment, right? It's the same sort of thing. There's a lot of government regulation in the market to protect it, which is an unusual thing. Technology has allowed us to attack the stock ticker, which is effectively what's happening, which is affecting the value of companies and people's livelihood. So where is all this going? What do I think of Warren Buffett? He's got enough money to not let that happen. The Fed didn't need to shore up the stock price. He has $168 billion or something in cash. Why isn't he investing it? It's actually against his own principles. He's waiting for the price to go down at the cost of people. Now we'll go into his second bit, which is related to this emotional theory. And this is sort of related to the emotional theory as well. If all of your wealth has been created from companies, which are people working together, right? And he says this, and then led by someone, and you missed the biggest high growth period being tech companies. You missed it, right? You missed it. It was, I don't believe in tech companies. No, you didn't believe in the revenue models. But what you didn't invest in was the technology, which has now got 100 years on it. Like you didn't invest in the Industrial Revolution. So someone that doesn't invest in the Industrial Revolution, and then at a time when it could now invest and protect it, but is waiting for it to drop as far as possible, which is what I think he's doing, or he's so scared because he's quite old, and I think Charlie's not being sort of in the picture as much, then stuff ya. Like,
and it's uncharted waters for him as well.
Super uncharted.
Like, bonds are down, gold
Everything's down.
and stocks are going up together, which typically never happens in history, and we're higher than we've ever been on, the All Ords or the Dow Jones ever in history. Like, he doesn't even know how to
So
do
the
it.
emotional response is, right now, if you were applying the principles that, say, Bill Graham and the government's protecting the market because people are sitting on money, by the way. If American people came together and funded itself, then it wouldn't need to do it as much as it is, which is a big difference, right? So short-term gain for a quarter over long-term survivability of an empire is another way of looking at it. You could do two things right now. You could be buying up the companies at what they're worth, but his strategy is to buy them at a good price. He's getting a good price. Let's be real. And then he could have got them at a great price, but the government just shored them up. So now they're more valuable than they're more priced more high. But he didn't act, right? The reason he didn't act is he's driven by emotion that his share price would have dropped. That's my read, which is related to this theory. And the second thing that I think is very, very pertinent is you don't want to act, man. Pay a dividend.
He refused to pay dividends.
Pay a dividend.
Pay one dividend in the 1960s. And
Pay a dividend.
I think he said afterwards that he must have been in the bathroom when they made that decision.
What you're saying is that you're better at allocating capital than everyone else in the world, including people that gave you capital. It's pretty arrogant, don't you think? So my read on it is that I think he's probably quite old, maybe lost his edge. But really simply, if you think about the strategy, is it the market that he was investing in before? No, it's not. Did he miss the tech revolution that would help him understand how the market's working now? I would say yes. And honestly, when we talk about the emotional theory, and I know there's another link to the airline bit, is that he doesn't want to lose the money because he's still playing the game, which is emotional response. And two, he doesn't want to drop his share price. But if you think about it, if you pay a dividend, there's a high chance that your share price goes up because more people want to be into that investment.
We'll probably get to this when we start talking about his openness to experience. But
very open to experience.
Have you seen any investment that he's made that is in any way risky?
No, that was his whole thing, right? Was de-risk everything.
And this is why he talks about how, I wish I would have invested in Google or Amazon. I was like, but he was never the sort of person who's ever going to invest in Amazon or Google. His money was all made through insurance.
Yeah, and his 50. So if you think of revolutions, he's investing in their last 30 years of the market, of a 100-year market for companies, and he's investing just longer than everyone else.
Well,
so your incremental gains are great, but you don't.
Well,
I'm significantly. I believe in a capitalist market, but I'm significantly optimistic. People, if the market works the way it does, people in lower classes can improve their income and quality. Companies can have cash to go forward and advance humanity. And if you are this way, so people go, well, Tom, you're not a $1 billion fund manager or whatever. I go, well, the job is allocating capital, right? You're not allocating any of it. So not only is it yes, you've accumulated a lot of it, but you're not allocating it. And it goes against the principle of investing for the long term if you're not allocating it. And the thing is, if you don't want to allocate it and you're too worried about it, then why don't you just pay a dividend and let the other people allocate it? Because to me, in theory, the government shouldn't have to shore up the share price to protect it from a hostile acquisition from another country.
That's the whole point
because
of the market.
the money is in the market. It's just not in the hands of those that can attach it. And my read on it is, do I like Warren Buffett? I don't know, probably not. Second read is he responsible? Is he in a seat of responsibility? Yes. Anyone with that much,
fame.
No, yeah, but anyone with that much money is responsible. And you got that money by operating within the capitalist market that you're now not protecting. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. And I think it's because he's worried about his, there's a saying when you watch people that are the greatest of all time, right? And there's other guys that could have also been the greatest of all time, but then they played that extra 2 seasons and they shouldn't have played them because they weren't at their game. They're missing their number 2 and they're not looking at everything they did wrong, right? So, and this goes into your airline conversation. He constantly reinvests in airlines because he wants to own airlines. I don't know why.
Well, he just got out of the airlines
Again.
Yeah.
I
You
think
talk about him hitting that last stage of the cycle all the time of a organizational market life cycle. Berkshire Hathaway was originally, when he purchased it, a cotton mill, which he had to completely rebuild. And he talked about how that was probably the worst investment he ever made, was buying into that company. But I want to talk for a second around Charlie Munger, who's his 2IC. What role do you think that Charlie's had, and why is Warren the one who gets all the accolades as opposed to Charlie?
Just different temperaments. I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
I don't know about it.
I don't
Did
know
Warren
enough
start it,
I
though?
don't know enough to comment.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that from what it looks like, is that, which is mind blowing, is that Charlie's probably the less open minded of the two. Like, you shouldn't keep doing the same thing, man.
The thing that I like most about it is right now, at this point in time, he has more money, but his decision-making ability is no better off than anybody else. What I mean is no one can project. This is what I've always loved about the stock market. They literally can't forecast what's going to happen. And there's so many examples of where it doesn't do what they thought it was going to do.
The people that forecast what's going to happen aren't producing anything.
Correct. So like it all comes back to the fact that it's a game. You know, serious punters don't bet on the Melbourne Cup because the whole thing is somewhat pretend.
It's harder and harder to pick.
Or they don't understand.
Yeah.
The game is less rigged.
Yeah.
Is the best way of describing the Melbourne Cup. Some people might say it's more rigged. I think it's less rigged. I think having so many people trying to rig it makes it less rigged.
Maybe.
So
there's predictability in the chaos.
Well, let's just talk about airlines for a second. The dude's got an obsession with investing in airlines. Right now is in the last 10 years, it's been much smarter to invest in airlines. Why? The country or the world has become more globalist. People want to get more face-to-face. Cultures are becoming very high context, which is very interesting. And that's because of information. And technology is getting better. What they haven't worked out yet is that some airlines got really far ahead in the last 5 years. Delta's one of them. Qantas is one of them. They're using technical applications to get ahead. Now,
and make their business models more efficient because the fundamental business model is not great.
Well, it sort of is great. If you think about it, it's got reoccurring revenue models, loyalty systems. It's got if you look at the back end of their technology, though, remember they're trying to build the front end rather than fixing the back end. So you're talking about a 24/7 business that's making money all day. It's actually pretty good. The problem is
maybe just low margin.
Maybe pilots are overpaid because they're just pressing a button. It could be simply that the wages within the airline industry are overpaid because they haven't adapted to the technology safety, right? So there is way more value in buying an airline now than there was.
I think that's just because the world's not ready to have a pilotless plane. They want to hold some dude accountable.
It's really, really simple. But it's a long-term look. It's now, okay, we know that people want to fly from A to B. There's probably a 20-year market in it. That probably adapts to owner stock longer than everyone else, which is, just over 2 cycles. And now's the time to back the dudes that just built an effective business. Like Delta built an effective business and pull your money out? And then just add it to your pile of cash that you jump in like Scrooge McDuck. Have you ever seen Scrooge McDuck? What did that dude jump into the pile and just breaks all his legs because it's coins? You can't swim in it. I think that's an emotional response. Like, oh shit, I made the same mistake again, rather than going, well, let's look at the market, right? The market's going to open up again within a year. If I stick by Delta right now or Qantas right now, my share, and go, hey dudes, fix your tech. Put this money into tech. I'll keep the money going, but you are going to fix all of your back end while the world's fixing itself. And I guarantee you that share price would skyrocket as soon as it comes back to normality.
But I think he doesn't think like that because he didn't invest in tech.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. So if you think about it, well, what do you think of Warren Buffett? Well, he's great at allocating companies in when they're in their last 50 years of a 100-year reign? And is he great at being a fund manager? Ask his shareholders. Are they getting any money? It's great to back the winner, but not if you're never at the game and you get to watch them shoot the hoop and then get to go home with the signed jersey. Like, you were there, but you're not really there. So I don't know if he quite is. And I don't know.
Well, the share price is about $300,000 because it's all liquid capital. He wants long-term investors, which means that even though the share price keeps going up, it is very hard to offload your stock. So how do you actually make money out of it unless over the long term?
I think we're going to find it really hard to build his big five.
Yeah. Let's kick into it though.
He's not open-minded at all.
No, I don't think he's.
What were we giving for that?
20, under 20.
Call it 15%. Conscientiousness?
It's obviously very high.
Yeah, I would have erred on high. I don't know if he's
Very
outrageously high like Bezos, but
It has to be. You can't be the best at getting to where he got to. Like, you can't acquire that much capital and not be conscientious. The dude has the same routine every day, for fuck's sake.
so I agree with that.
His orderliness is off the charts.
Yeah, I think his focus and his orderliness is off the charts, but I don't think his achievement striving or like he didn't build something like Bezos did day to day, grinding it out.
Sort of, he did that. Different.
I think he'd be extremely achievement striving, but it would be rather than building a company, he's measuring his success on stock prices.
His wealth.
He's pretty much the same as a high-performing tech entrepreneur with no openness and hardly any neuroticism, or maybe a blip in neuroticism. At the end of the day, a lot of people that are in shares, they're gamblers.
Yeah.
Because you're not building things. You're relying on other people to build things. So it's forecasting.
What would you call him for extroversion?
He's highly extroverted.
Yeah,
He's always...
So he's having a yarn and yeah.
What, 95%?
Yeah, probably somewhere between 70 and 90.
Agreeableness.
He's the same as every other high-performing executive. He's a low agreeableness. He's around 15, 20%. Enough to get people to work for you, but not enough to agree with everyone. And he doesn't. He has pretty clear ideas. But to link it back to what we spoke about today, has he related an emotional label to his job? Yes, everyone does. Where has he labeled it? Looks like in the buying of airlines. Then I say he's probably just buying them as they win more shares than really dreaming and owning it. And that's just one that's got more validity than other sort of stocks. So I don't know. But I think where he really has it is the emotional labeling attached to being number one and being number one on the basis of your share price and your capital. And I think it's actually to the point where it's affected his ability in the last 20 years to actually apply the principles that he believes in. And I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Like, I think what really bothers me about it right now and this is maybe because I'm just young and whatever, he could really help pump the US market right now.
Yeah.
And he's not doing it. He could be doing it, or he could be waiting. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully next week he buys all these companies and fills them full of cash and helps them innovate.
I don't see that happening.
Yeah. All right, I'll leave you with this final question around Warren Buffett. How much of his success do you think comes down to hard work, dedication versus good fortune and luck?
I'm a massive believer in you create your own luck.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's definitely hard work.
Definitely hard work.
Hard-working guy, man. He's number one. Got to respect him for that.
Yeah.
I hope he does something in the next month. Just 3 months, though. I really hope he does.
I hope he does something that leaves a legacy that's more than he was the richest man on the planet. Not that he even is anymore, but yeah.
Yeah. We'll see.
Fellas, thank you.
Good sesh.
Have a good week.
Hit the showers.
That's weird.
Till next time.